Hello, everyone, and welcome to CSM Mastermind. My name is Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast, today discussing strategies for increasing stakeholder engagement in accounts. This free learning event is being hosted by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, with more than 4,000 graduates in more than 60 countries. Yeah, I said 4,000. It's crazy. Our popular virtual instructor-led certification boot camps are now running monthly. I'm also really excited about some great new instructor-led courses and programs that we're rolling out now, including outcome-based selling for customer success, data-driven decision-making for customer success, and change management for customer success. Those are all virtual instructor-led trainings by top people in their field teaching that. So you can find out more about that at successcoaching.co. Now, for those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that's relevant to customer success. This right here is the only script that I follow during the entire hour. Regardless of the company you work for, the details of your customer-facing role, or the size of the customers you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. We also encourage you to suggest topics you'd like to hear about. So if you have a suggestion, please reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and direct message me. The schedule for our upcoming CSM Mastermind events, along with a whole bunch of other resources, can also be found at successcoaching.co. So please check that out. We will post a replay of this webinar along with a transcription by early next week on our website. Usually it's Tuesday, the Tuesday following. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver success. What this series allows us to do is focus on the practical and give you real-world advice, tips, techniques, and shared experiences from those out in the wild that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. To do that, we invite 3 participants from the customer success community to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people that have been recommended to us as being great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and perspectives. We will be taking questions later on during the webcast, so please use that Q&A functionality found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. Please make sure to see if your question's already being asked and just upvote it. Makes it easier for us to manage. Now, I'm very excited to welcome our panel for today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's get started with Miranda. Miranda, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Miranda Nguyen. I'm a strategic customer success manager at Sisense, which is a BI and analytics company. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, and I come from the Periscope data merger. So we merged with Sisense about a year ago. And our customers range from customers like SmartCar, who uses operational dashboards to alert them on when carts need new batteries, when inventory is low, when a coin box is full and needs to be replaced, anything that they need to know to keep operations smooth and also maximize their profits. My role is helping customers become more data-driven, so integrating data into their day-to-day. And my stakeholders can range from several different departments, several different teams. Anybody who's eager to use data is typically who I work with.
Excellent. Thanks, Miranda. Jamie, you're up.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Hey, everyone. Jamie Jeff, Chief Customer Officer at Cortex Building Intelligence. We have a SaaS platform that helps large commercial real estate owners and asset managers save money by reducing their energy consumption. So Empire State Building is one of our more well-known customers. We help them save about $1 million a year through the use of our platform.
Excellent. Thanks, Jamie. And last but not least, Philip.
Hey, everyone. My name is Philip. I'm the founder and CEO of Castify. We provide a customer success software tailored for SaaS businesses. And yeah, I'm super happy I could join today's webinar and eager to get things rolling.
I think we got a great panel today. Lots of different perspectives, lots of different roles. So I love that. So let's get to the topic. Let's get to the topic for today. It's so important to deliver the value we promise during the sales cycle, but just as important is that you're conveying that value in the right ways and to the right people, right? And a big piece of that puzzle is ensure you're engaging with the right people and in the right manner. And so stakeholder engagement is critical. Given that, let's start with making sure you've actually got all of the key stakeholders identified, right? So what are some questions that you've asked or strategies that you've used in order to identify key customer stakeholders beyond those that have already been identified during the sales process? Okay, who wants to get us started? Philip.
Yeah, I think this is a great question to ask and a great way to start this discussion. I can share some experiences that we see happening when we onboard our customers and challenges that they face when they start to use a customer success software. Now, one of the first things is the handover between sales and customer success. This is where I think there are often improvements possible, meaning how well is that process defined? How well did the sales team figure out who are the key stakeholders in that project, in that onboarding, in that entire sales process? And how well is that documented, and how well is that handover happening between sales and customer success? So there's a first drop-off very often happening, a lack of transfer of knowledge, where already some stakeholders might get lost. And so that is a recommendation I can give, that looking into this specific process of handover of stakeholders and how is that defined, and is there a clear process in place? And the other one certainly is conversations, right? So in your onboarding, if you as customer success manager are responsible for the onboarding, which in most of the cases is the case, you have conversations with people on the other hand. So ask open questions, ask questions like, and who else would do that in your department? And how do you see that? And whose responsibility is to do X, Y, Z? Meaning with open questions with the ones, with the stakeholders that you know already, try to find your way throughout the department or departments. Of course, all depends a little bit on the complexity of your product and how many teams are involved in the onboarding, but ask open questions and try to figure out responsibilities within the team. If the team is entirely new to you, understand who are the personalities that eventually took the decision to purchase your product, and who are the ones that will use the product, and try to figure that out with open questions to the ones that you have already passed along from the sales team, and look into your handover from sales to customer success, which is really a really critical point. And I think we all might assume that this is happening, this handover. It might happen, but there might be room to improvement for the one or the other process.
Yeah, I find more times than not that is just not dialed in between the customer success and sales team. Jamie, you got something to add?
Yeah, just to kind of build upon what Philip was describing, as far as asking those open-ended questions to try to probe for who else might be important to connect to. One way to help guide that process is for CS teams to map out the potential different personas that you might find on an account, right? So that you go into those initial conversations, those kickoff calls, et cetera, kind of playing a game of bingo to understand and to confirm, do they or do they not have this persona, in which case we need to respond accordingly. So in our business, we know there's always going to be a sponsor who we need to connect with. And we know that there's always going to be building engineers who are our end users. At many of our customers, there's a kind of emerging role of a head of sustainability, right? And in cases where that person is not also the sponsor, it's important for us to do that probing when we're getting to know that account, and to say, hey, do you have someone who, kind of separately from the financial side of things is managing sustainability for your portfolio, to try to identify if there's an additional person who's not at the table, but that we need to spend some time getting to know.
And you've got a very specific, very, very finite list of use cases, correct, Jamie?
So our objective is very clear, right? Our customers use our platform to, it provides recommendations and insights for how they can run these massive, 1, 2, 3 million square foot buildings more efficiently, particularly focused on their HVAC systems, their heating and cooling. And so when organizations follow our recommendations, on average, we generally save them about 5 times what they're paying to us in ARR. And we contractually guarantee that they'll save at least twice what they're paying us, right? So our mission and every one of our motions is fully aligned in terms of delivering those savings as quickly as possible and as significantly as possible.
Yeah. So, but in Miranda's case, though, you've got a platform, right? You've got an almost bespoke implementations. You can start with a pipeline report for a sales team and end up doing analytics for finance or even customer success.
Yeah. So ours is a little bit different, where there can be a lot of different stakeholders, and it's important to map out who the different levels that you should be in touch with, as well as the different stakeholders. So for us, there's always going to be a practitioner. So a data analyst, data scientist, BI analyst who implements the product and creates dashboards for people. There's also going to be a stakeholder or a manager, BI manager, or a VP of product who cares about that project being deployed, managing it, determining what the criteria is. And then what's also important is an exec sponsor who gives oversight on how these pertain to the business level goals. And that person's important because, like you mentioned, there might be a sales team that we're working with that has a pipeline report, and we're helping deploy that in a dashboard. But we're not exactly sure how that aligns with how important the business actually cares about. Like, is this an important report? Is this something that might be replaced down the line because it's no longer a key initiative? So it's also important to figure out who that exec level sponsor is, and that'll also give us oversight into different stakeholders that we might want to be in touch with. And if you're not sure who this is, I've interviewed people at the company, other CSMs or product teams, of like, who are the different people that we're usually successful in having interactions with. And then we also happen to have an in-house user researcher who talks to several different companies, and we pinpointed the key personas that work well within our product and also have a really high impact in the business.
Right. So you're always looking to uncover opportunities, right? And your data analyst, your BI manager are going to be tremendously helpful to you in identifying who those people are.
Yep. Yeah. So their end customers are several different departments. So they'll usually create dashboards for sales, for marketing, for product, and sometimes they use Sisense. I was going to say Periscope. That was my old company. Sisense for like sales and marketing, but they use Tableau for product, for example. So just being able to understand the lay of the land, who the different stakeholders are for different products, how those tie together is important for us.
So assuming like what Philip said, we've got a good handoff and we understand who the stakeholders are, right? Or we understand who our stakeholders are at that phase of the customer journey. What approaches have you employed and recommend for ensuring that stakeholders understand the value that's being delivered by the solution? Because it's one thing to deliver the value, but it's another effort sometimes to make sure that the right people are hearing or understanding the value that you are delivering.
I could take that one. So I think what's important is not just delivering it. So a lot of people work with the day-to-day person to implement whatever project that you have, and it's really successful. But you also want to have touch points with the other people within that level. So the exec sponsor, for example, where you might want to set the expectation during the onboarding process that typically we'll have like a biweekly, monthly sync with the practitioner or the manager of the project. But on a quarterly or semi-annual basis or before renewal, whatever works for your company, we're also going to do either an EBR, QBR to talk about how the different outcomes from these projects are actually aligning to the business. And it's also important to figure out at that point if the business needs have changed. So I know we had a colleague of mine had a customer who they purchased for a specific reason, for a specific use case, and we implemented that really well. And over the next 2 years, they had no complaints. They're a happy customer. But they ended up churning without us really realizing it because the business goals kind of shifted. And that kind of ended up aligning with a different product. And if we had the chance to get ahead of it, then we probably wouldn't see a churn. So it's important to also align with that exec sponsor who determines, where the company is headed and making sure that your product is always meeting those use cases.
And every additional group that you get to be using your platform makes your platform that much stickier. Wait a minute, you can't get rid of Sisense. It's not just sales now; it's sales and marketing and finance, and that's one of the things I loved about being involved in analytics tools. So you can get really sticky if you play your cards right.
Yep.
Yeah, I think.
Jamie, you wanted to weigh in on that?
It's really important, really early on, to make sure, number one, that you understand your customers' objectives, and two, that you articulate how you're going to demonstrate value, right? And to make sure that those two things are aligned. Because even in cases where, look at it, I've been in CS roles at a variety of different companies. In some cases, the value a product delivers is very clear to draw that line of attribution to. In some cases, it's really hard and really subjective. But in either case, anywhere you fall on that continuum, it's important to share with your customer how you're going to demonstrate your value to make sure that they're bought into that way of measuring, right? Because if you're not, even if you are delivering value, and if they don't believe your way of measurement, you're going to be stuck, right? And I gave the example of us needing to probe when our customers have a head of sustainability, and we encountered this challenge with a customer recently where we were in an early kickoff meeting, and we always focus very much on financial savings. And so our pitch was kind of savings. And he said, whoa, hold up a second. Did somebody here tell you that financial savings is the most important thing to us? And I said, well, tell me more. He said, well, I'm the head of sustainability. There may be cases where we actually do something that costs more money if there's a greater sustainability impact, right? And so that's where, if we had just kind of fallen into our standard motion of we're just reporting on dollars and cents and we assume that's all everybody cares about, we would have seriously missed the mark with this customer.
That makes sense. Philip, you had something to add?
Yeah, I think this goes also back to the entire sales handover. So it's also, I think, important to understand what is the expectation of the customer. As Jamie just said, can be very different, right? So it's not necessarily always the same, despite you sell the same product to the same people. They might have different expectation on the value that you provide. This is one thing. The other thing, of course, if you have data that proves the value, like in Jamie's case, like we saved you like 5x of what you would have spent otherwise. I mean, this is great data. However, cross-check it with like, is that really what they want to see? So I'm a data-driven person. So if you have the data that can like demonstrate the value, like reducing the churn would be one of the data points we as Castify would have, like, right, if you reduce your churn by half, this is a great thing to demonstrate. This is the reason why most of the people would like look for a software like this. And for Jamie, it's the savings. However, cross-check with that, with the fact, is that really that the only thing they want to see? And do you have maybe additional data points? Then it might also be, from my experience, it might be there is the team that you work on a daily basis might have different expectations on the value than the major decision maker or the key holder that is not using your platform at all, or he's just going to cross-check with them. Like he's going, like you can tell him whatever you want, but he's going to go to the team and say, hey guys, what do you think about the solution? Should we renew the contract? And if the guys are on board, he's just going to blind sign it and that. So that's another way, basically, to demonstrate your value. If you have the users on your side, that typically also helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, really, it's to net that out. It's so important to understand your stakeholders' perspectives, motivations, influences, expectations, and you can't assume that they're all the same across the board, right? Everybody has a different perspective, right? So that
I would say they are almost never.
They're never the same. Yeah.
No, even if the software is rather simple,
Yeah.
the motivation of people getting your solution is really, really different. So even if you have a rather simple product, the motivation that these guys have is very often very different. Like there might be really different motivations, and that's why it's important for also again the sales process to document exactly that things, because that is typically in the discovery calls, in the sales conversations. They probably tell the pain, and they probably tell the sales team why they actually signed up and why they actually look for this solution. And it's very important for a company, I believe, to note that down, to have an exact way to say, hey, this guy looks exactly for that. Like in Jamie's case, he's not looking only for the savings. He's also looking for the sustainability. So that's an important key information that the customer success team needs in order to be able to say, hey, we not just save to that one, but also X, Y, Z.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You would expect people at different levels to have different expectations and different objectives. But what's important is, and I'm interested in understanding if you have any of you have any experience with this. How do you ensure that there's alignment that exists between the different levels of the stakeholders? Because my head of whatever has an objective that's typically going to be tied to a corporate objective, and that individual's middle management may have different objectives, but feed into the accomplishment of that overall objective that executive has. And then the end users are like, well, what's in it for me? Right. So you need to understand at all those different levels what motivates them. And so how do you ensure that alignment exists between those different levels of stakeholders?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in. I think you have to start, as I was saying previously, by articulating your intent of how you plan to demonstrate value, and getting it in front of those key stakeholders early on, as a way to validate that you're heading down the right path. Right. In many cases, like I'd rather put out a slide that somebody has an issue with early on than not, so that I can know on day one, on week one, somebody disagrees with how we're going to approach this program. I want to know it right away so that I can course correct. And right. So the more that you can proactively kind of put that out there to say, here's what we understand your goals to be, here's how we plan on addressing them, and here's how we plan on measuring success, right? You put that in front of your customer and see what sort of response it gets back. Hopefully everybody's nodding and smiling, but it's not a fail if someone's shaking their head, provided you do that early enough in the process to do something about it.
I think it's a great point you make. It's so important, and I see it too often where the how do you measure success is left unsaid. There's this assumption, and the problem with that is unless you've clearly stated, okay, here's how we define success, and then you've quantified that, right? So you've defined your success metric and you've quantified it. I want to lower operational costs by 20%, right? So be very specific. When you get to that point where you believe you've achieved their outcome, unless it's all spelled out and everybody's on the same page, there can be some questions. There's no well-defined target. The customer is saying to themselves, well, that's not what I was thinking. And you're saying, well, that's not what we were thinking. Well, the problem is because you were thinking. Let's get it out there, right? Let's put it out right in front of them and say, here's how we define success.
Absolutely.
And something go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just trying. I was just
all right, Miranda, you go. And then Philip, you go. Okay, Miranda, you go.
Okay.
I was just adding one small point there. This can really be a challenge, what you described before, like when there's such a multi-tier level of users, like as you described, like 3, that can be really, really hard to go through. And I guess it comes all down to conversations and talks that you have with these people, as many as possible and as structured as possible, to note all those things down, to understand exactly your your target audience. So I guess it's about people skills and understanding and having conversations with these stakeholders.
Lots of listening. Miranda, you had something?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I completely agree. It depends on you talking to each of the different levels of stakeholders, understanding what they care about. And the way that I see the CSM's job is to actually connect the dots between them. So I know Andrew mentioned that, an executive might care about lowering operational costs, and a manager might care about, saving their team's time on building dashboards on manual tasks. And so how do you do things together? And, the data analyst might care about building a chart really quickly. And if you look at it, they do tie together, where if you build a chart quickly, you can save time on other tasks. They can focus on other things. It lowers the operational costs of doing one thing, and you can focus on higher value things, like maybe predictive analysis or whatever it might be. So I think listening and also figuring out how those two things or, motivations tie together is really important.
Yeah, I think it's important that you deliberately call that out too, that you show the links and say, listen, this is your objective, key stakeholder, your middle management. I get your objective and I see the tie-in and into all the individual contributors. This is how you tie into middle management. So, and being very deliberate about, laying that out and showing the connective tissue between those things. So
agreed. And people on the practitioner level don't always think big picture.
No.
Where if you can help them speak that language, it can help them, showcase all the value that they're doing at the company, really show them to be like a really great contributor for the company, probably get promoted, which is what every CSM talks about, wanting their end users to be able to help them do. So it'll be a win-win if we can tie all those pieces together.
Exactly. Yes. And you need to lead them down the path. Okay. Good. Anything else to add to that topic? Otherwise, I thought we would jump into some Q&A. Hear from the audience. Sound good? All right. So our first question comes from Julie. Julie, thank you. Thanks for the question. Thanks for joining us today. And it's been upvoted quite a bit. How would you approach primary stakeholders who don't want you to work with, communicate with, or contact anyone outside of themselves? Wow, that's a very possessive primary stakeholder. So how do you deal with that?
I mean, I guess this also comes down to people's skills, right? Like, I haven't met anyone who is not able or willing to talk to you at all. So there might be people who want to talk a lot less. And if you understand that, then you can probably get them that way and say, hey, it's just a 5 minutes call, right? It's not half an hour session that we do. It's a 5 minutes call. Do you have 5 minutes? Can we hop on a call? Maybe when is a convenient time for you? And then, of course, get to the point right away. So I guess it's a tough one, though. However, I have not experienced like a practical example where they were not willing at all to talk to you. They might be different in the, like, someone would like to talk to you about an hour to complain about everything that happens. And, the QBR is the most important thing, and they prepare for 1 week. And this other person really, they want to get the information in 5 minutes if possible, and they rather don't talk to you at all. But okay, for 5 minutes, they can do it. It's probably for you to find out what kind of personality is on the other hand, and then adjust your approach accordingly. That would be probably my approach there. If the person doesn't want to talk to you at all, I guess that's a general problem then.
Well, actually, I don't think that that's what Julie's asking. Philip, I agree with you on that. You definitely need to adjust your communication style to meet whatever the customer is expecting out of you. I think what Julie's asking here is, I've signed the deal. I'm the primary stakeholder. I don't want you talking to anybody else.
I see.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's a tough one too, I guess. But then I guess ultimately, if that is the decision, you have to kind of respect that, I guess. It's not a good idea to kind of backdoor into some of the teams then, and specifically if it's a decision maker, right? So I guess then the best approach is to kind of try to find out as much as possible from that person, to try to ask the right questions about the team and how is the team, and do you have a practical example of the team, or did the team recently get back to you about X, Y, Z, and these kind of things, to try to find out as much as possible from that person.
I don't know. That to me just reeks of red flag. Right? What
Yeah,
Jamie?
definitely, yeah.
Well, Jamie, Miranda, have you either of you had challenges like this before?
Yeah, Miranda, go ahead.
Yeah, I think every CSM has that issue, where I think a lot of it stems from like lack of trust, right? Where if we were to give you access to somebody else in the organization, what are you going to talk to them about? Why do you want to talk to them? Why can't you go through me? And so a lot of the conversations to navigate around that is telling them what it is that you want to talk about, what value add. So leveraging your organization internally, where if I wanted to get in contact with their VP of customer success, is there somebody like, is my VP of customer success somebody that could add value to them? Having a reason why you want to talk to that stakeholder is a good. And if they say no, then you ask them, similar to what Philip said, that you want to know from that person, and really come from a genuine place of like this, like there's value in why I want to talk to them. This is what we're looking to help with. We have these dashboards that help with this use case. If they want to be the liaison, then I think you respect that and go through them. But after a certain point, I think they understand why you want to talk to the other person. And then it's more efficient to just have you talk to them directly. But it's kind of a trust thing where you have to go through them first, make sure that they know why you want to talk to them. And then they'll hopefully open the gate to other people.
Yeah, I think this fits into a category, this phrase I like to use in these situations of like, you need to slow down for yellow lights, right? A lot of times when we're driving, when weren't all under lockdown, we're heading into traffic, the light turns yellow, and we stomp on the gas to fly through the yellow light. And that same sort of thing can happen on calls with customers where the customer says something weird, right? And this in the mind of the CSM, you're just like, oh, that's weird. I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen, and I'll just keep going with my spiel, right? And then you come back and you huddle and you say, hey, did you talk to the other stakeholders? Well, no, they said we're not allowed to, right? Oh, well, why? I don't know. They just said we couldn't, right? And that's one of those situations where you need to slow down and spend some time with that person. Say, okay, like help me understand, why you don't want us talking to other people here, because we typically do. And to the points that Miranda raised, right? Like, here's why we talk to these other folks. This is what our typical process is, but help me understand what's unique about your situation, why we shouldn't, right? And digging into that, you can learn a ton, right? Of like, well, they're really busy. What are they really busy with, right? So you can learn about some other big initiative, or maybe it's like confidentially, they're about to be laid off, right? Any of those sorts of things, like you might learn. You need to invest the time to just unpack any sorts of, out of left field comments or guidance that you get from a customer.
I like that, to slow down, because I typically don't. I try and power right through the yellow light. So we got the slow down. We've got the, we're going to explain why we want to reach out to these folks. I want to add one more to that, and that's playing the ego card, right? Help me help you look like the smartest person in your company by introducing me into this other group that I think we have a solution for. And I'll let you take the lead. I'll let you be the one that says that takes all the glory of, hey, I thought of this, right? I thought of this as a potential solution for that problem that you have, right? And so play the ego card a little bit. Cool. Thank you, Julie, for the question. Our next question comes from David. David Ellen. Thank you, David. I see David on our Gain, Grow, Retain calls frequently on Thursday. Thanks for being here and contributing. David, along with 8 different upvotes, asks, when you think about engagement, what is your goal in splitting percentage content versus conversations between tactical execution and strategic discussions? So tactical execution versus future-based conversation.
I could take this one.
Go for it.
So I would say I would want to set the expectation that you're going to have a strategic conversation. Maybe I'd like to keep it on a quarterly basis, where that's where you pull in the manager level, in addition to the practitioner, and maybe semi-annual or quarter with the executive, to make sure that you're still aligned with everything. So I would say tactical, you should work with your practitioner more frequently to unblock them in order to get to certain outcomes. And once you hit certain milestones, I think it's really good, and to make sure that you actually celebrate those milestones. So it doesn't have to be a certain percentage percentage, I think when you have something to share, you should share it. Executives aren't always aware of what's happening on the ground level. And then if it's not a frequent cadence, at least make sure that you're touching base on a at least semi-annual basis, I would say, depending on how big your customers are, to make sure that even if you haven't tackled that milestone yet, you can talk about how you're progressing towards it, the value of what you're doing, and kind of keep them excited about why they purchased the product still. So there should be some level of touch point on a at least semi-regular basis.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, and I also think it depends a little bit on the context of the. I think there's no answer like a general answer. I think it depends on the context. When it's a QBR meeting, is it something short before renewal? Maybe in the renewal you want to rather give something more strategic, and you rather want to just like quickly summarize the successes that you had in the past year, but this is what the team already agreed on, and this is what we will do with you next year, right? So give you kind of a perspective there, specifically if you might have a situation where you did not perform that good in the past year, right? So the customer is highly on risk to leave you, then you might not want to go too much on those tactical execution points. You rather want to give an outlook in the future and a strategic outlook of what could happen the next year. So I guess it depends on the context as well of this conversation.
The context, who you're talking to, when it is, what points of the customer journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Jamie, you got something to add?
Yeah, I think the other piece is kind of what the trajectory of that customer is looking like, right? Because you do the tactical execution tasks in support of the strategy to deliver some outcomes, right? And so if I have two customers, one of whom is doing all the tactical things that we want them to do, and they're in line with the strategy that we set, and we are knocking the results out of the park, that's totally different than a couple other situations. One where it's like, these guys aren't doing the tactical things we asked them to do. They're just not showing up, right? Or maybe they're doing them and it's not working, right? So depending on those different situations, I'm likely to kind of adjust that percentage, right? And also probably the frequency. If the tactics aren't being done, I'm going to have a conversation with the sponsor that's tactically focused, but it's at the sponsor level to say, look, I need you to get your team on board, because we're not going to get to the outcome you want if they're not getting these things done, right? If it's the case where they're doing them, but it's not working, then we're kind of bringing the conversation up a little bit, like of, hey, everyone's rowing in the right direction, but we're not getting where we're trying to get. Are we still aligned? Do we still have the right strategy here? Or has something at the company changed to where we need to shift that strategy, et cetera? And then likewise, if it's the slam dunk situation, then I'm probably pulling up and saying, we're crushing it, right? How do we set the bar even higher, right? Or expand our goals, or try to take on new challenges.
Good. Makes sense. Thanks, David. Manuel asks, how do you address the typical problem of missing the champion stakeholder in the C-level who does not have the time or mission of operating your software? So I think this goes back to, how do we elevate the dissemination of value to stakeholders that we may not be speaking with on a regular basis, that are at arm's length, but could have an impact on our ability to renew or expand?
Yeah, I think, first things first, assuming that you have kind of laid out the right success criteria, part of that conversation is also, hey, let's plan for how we're going to stay in touch, right? I don't want to show up at the end of the year, hat in hand, asking for a renewal, having not spoken to you for 12 months, right? I also get that you're super busy, and you don't want my CSMs calling every other day with generic check-in calls, right? So what's the right cadence in between those for which we should be having a conversation? And then having had that agreement with them, it's really our job as CSMs and CS leaders to be relevant to that person, right? When you get their time, maybe you don't want to show up and just make it a feature dog and pony show, right? Tie your conversation back to the value outcomes that they care about, right? And be sure that you are delivering the things that are of interest to them, and that you are balancing, doing way more give than get or asking of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Miranda. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, going off of that, I think a lot of the times people haven't interacted with a CSM before, and they don't really understand why am I having, or they've had a negative interaction where they're like, I don't want these check-in calls, and so people are reluctant to be a champion for that. And I think outside of the renewal, which is a really good trigger point to be like, hey, we need to have a conversation because of this reason. I think it's also fair to just, give them value. So send them emails like, hey, we have this. I know that you're using Python, for example, which is a language that we have here internally. And I see that you're using it in XYZ way. Here's some example dashboards that people have used. You can copy the code, use it for yourself, and just continue to think about what would this person care about, and then deliver things, even if it's over an email. And if they have more questions or it's actually something that's interesting to them, they will want to set up time with you to talk more about it and pick your brain on it. But I think it's like Jamie said, you have to give more than you get at the beginning, or you don't get a meeting at the beginning. You have to kind of earn it. And by thinking about what it is that they care about, what other customers in similar roles care about, delivering that value in a way that's not asking for a lot of their time, I think builds a lot of trust.
Deliver value with every interaction. We teach our students that every single interaction. Make sure you're delivering value. Either demonstrating the value that they're getting, or you're delivering some sort of value. Generic check-ins, Philip, anything to add to that, or are you good?
Yeah, I think not much to add. Just being C-level myself, I can say that being aware that those people might not have all the times, and exactly avoid those generic outreaches. Right, be specific, provide value, and then. As Miranda said, then if it's relevant, people will actually respond to you, and they will actually come back to you.
Right. One more importantly, they're more if they realize that you're not going to waste their time, they're more likely to respond. Right. So don't ever waste their time. Honestly, they don't care that if it doesn't affect them, they don't care that you just raised a round, that you just rolled out a new feature, that you just earned a top 100 in some software award. They don't care. What they care about is the things that are going to affect their ability to extract $1.05, $1.10, $1.20 out of every dollar they spend with you. That's what they care about. Right. And that's what you need to lead with. Great. Thanks, Manuel, for the question. Christina asks, thank you, Christina. Christina asks, if stakeholders can't answer the how will you measure success question, are you recommending we should direct the conversation and say, this is how we recommend measuring, and then see what type of response we get?
Yeah, or this is how other customers measure this, to give you kind of an idea. This is what other of our customers would do. Could that be useful to you? Kind of an open question with some examples eventually.
Yeah, I go as far as have an inventory of these types of,
templates
of success criteria and typical measures of success, so you can quantify them and give them help them. That's what you're there for, right? When you're building out that success plan, right?
Sometimes people have trouble with the kind of blank slate questions like that. We have to recognize that as CSMs, we've done this thousands of times, right? We have onboarded thousands of customers, right? On the receiving end, our champion may not have gone through a similar process before, right? Or maybe they're onboarded by a company that just has a poor CS team, right? So we have to recognize that they might not come to the table as what we would consider the perfect customer. And so the use of those templates or that library can help give them something to react to, right? Again, like even if I put something that they view as wrong, great, then we can have a conversation, right? What's wrong about this? Tell me how you'd like to do it differently. Tell me what you don't agree with.
Yeah, you don't use that library to set their objective. You use it to begin the conversation. Well, how about this?
Yeah.
And let them respond. Excellent. Okay. Let's see. Miranda, anything? Or are you good? Anything to add to that?
I would agree with all of those. And if you don't know what those templates would be, ask around, talk to people. I think a lot of learnings is from tribal knowledge of other people, of what they do. So that's something that I've learned later on in my career, where you can accelerate. Like sometimes as a newer CSM, you take on the onus of like, I don't know these things, it's scary. So just talk to other people, interview a lot of people, and then you'll start to hear patterns, and you can consolidate what those recommendations to customers on their success metrics might be and what they typically.
And if you're a newer CSM, by the way, and that does not exist, you can earn some really nice cred points by starting a Google Sheet and consolidating all of that, of what you learned. And now you're in time. Now you've given back to your practice, and you've given everybody something that they can use. So if that does not exist, take the initiative, do it yourself. Excellent. Thank you, Christina, for that question. Justin asks, what do you do, or what can you do when you can't get a hold of the primary stakeholder?
If it's somebody that I've already talked to before and they go dark on me, something that works really well for me is I just put a calendar invite like a week out, or however long you think that their calendar is busy until. And usually they either just propose another time or they show up. It's surprisingly effective for me. But that's if it's somebody that you already know, or if it's somebody who you really need to get a hold of because the renewal's in 2 months and you need to figure things out. It's important. So I wouldn't use it all the time just because you want to ask them how things are going. It has to be important.
Yeah, I think there's something we all need to remember, that, and we talk about this in our courses, how just because somebody's gone dark on you doesn't mean that it's a problem with you. We need to, just as we try and take the perspective of our customer when we're trying to help them achieve their outcomes, we also need to remember that we need to take the perspective of the human being that's there. There are things that they are dealing with. You are likely one of many vendors that they're dealing with. You have no clue what's happening to their company, to their role. There could be personal reasons, right? They could have so much on their plate that they just don't have the mind space to deal with you right now. So so think about that, and don't get yourself wrapped around the axle thinking, oh geez, I can't. I'm unable to get a hold of my primary stakeholder. Jamie, you got something to add?
Yeah, a couple things. I think one, you have to ask yourself, do a little bit of diagnostics on how did we lose their attention, right? Are we wasting their time with checking calls? Are we not relevant, et cetera, right? The other side of it is, when you're thinking about the individual, is to think about the depth of your relationship and how you're trying to reach them. And this is like, a former boss of mine used to say, you should aspire to be on text message level familiarity with every one of your clients or customers, right? And he used that literally, but also kind of metaphorically, right? Of, look, if you're just sending, reply all email over and over again, like, hey, just following up, just circling back, like, well, have you tried calling them, right?
Yeah.
Or do you know them well enough to shoot a text and say, hey, just wanted to connect real quick, haven't heard back from you, right? Because if you put in the time to develop that relationship, kind of the same way that Miranda was describing, right? If you're comfortable enough just dropping a calendar invite, right? Like, you should also be comfortable enough to text them or just call their cell phone or what have you. Don't just rely on, well, I sent 3 emails and haven't heard back, and so now I'm out of options.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Sometimes
And I
all
think-
we need to do is just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it also is important, again, to highlight that, as a customer success manager, your job is also not to have just like this primary contact, but potentially you have other contacts that you can use then in this case, right? So it's all about preparing yourself already for the situation, being able to have multiple contacts within this organization, do your networking, be prepared for the situation, because then maybe someone else is going to ask you, is going to answer you, and they're going to tell you, hey, you know what? He's in hospital. He cannot answer you. He's not going to come back for 2 months. He's on sick leave, right? He just doesn't have a out of office reply there. And the problem is solved, right? So I think it's very important for customer success managers to also understand this network concept and to be able to prepare for exactly those cases, because this will happen for sure to you at any point at some point in your career. This will happen 100% sure that this person goes just dark. So the better you prepared for that and alternatives that you have, the better.
And just to add, you can also leverage like your own manager or your VP to reach out to their manager, their VP. Maybe that person left the company, maybe they're no longer there, maybe they're on leave, like Philip mentioned. So it's a good way to multi-thread too. If you've told this person that you've reached out to them and they're not responding, it's a good reason to reach out to someone else.
Yeah, I think like the theme amongst these is like, don't just tell yourself the story that it is personal and they're just ignoring you, right? Like there could be 1,000 other reasons why they haven't gotten back to you. And so just kind of do some homework to understand what else might be going on.
I guess it's almost never personal, right? So when was that? Well, it's like super rarely, right? So 99% of the cases will be some other reasons for that, either time constraints, out of office, other things, other problems on their table and so forth. So almost never it's gonna be a personal thing. Can happen, of course, but
But the one place where it is a personal thing though is if you have one name on your list of all your key contacts in the customer, then you personally have not done a good job. You need to right. If you have one name on that list, then you're not doing your job. You need to have multiple names on the list. Those might not be people who are going to be stakeholders. They might be people. They could just be. They could be individual end users. They're not going to necessarily buy something from you directly, but they can give you information. Right. Exactly. So that whole stakeholder mapping is so important. And don't forget the end users, right? Those people, especially the ones, if there's a end user there that especially has the ear of other end users, they can be incredibly valuable to you, not just to tell you what's going on, what's in the head of the big boss, but to actually help you drive adoption as well, acting as a fan. So excellent. Thanks, Justin. I think we got time for one more question here. Lauren asks, how does your process change if the handoff from sales does not or will not include thorough documentation regarding stakeholders or the key information like their underlying objectives?
I'll jump in on this one.
Have a meeting with sales and talk to them about it. Right.
You do, you need to work with sales to articulate what you need, what's kind of the minimum that you need. But, I often take the other side of this argument in that sales' job is to sell deals, right? It's not sales' job to make CS's job easy, right? And so certainly we want to work with sales to say, hey, like, if you can't tell me anything else, tell me these two things, right? But prepare your process so that you're assuming that every deal is not going to come over clean, right? And there's going to be information that's missing, right? The main thing that you want to manage in that handoff is that, you don't step in the proverbial dog do, right? And that's where you define the key information that you need from sales, right? Because the last thing that you want is when you go to that customer on the kickoff call and you say, hey, why did you buy our product? And they're like, I've been telling your sales rep for 9 months why I'm buying your product. Did you guys seriously not talk to each other? Right. Yeah. So that helps you define like your minimum set of requirements from sales is let's not look stupid on the kickoff call. Right. And from there, once CS takes the ball, sometimes you're going to have to do some work, more work than you might like. But that's what we're paid for.
Yeah. Agreed. Let's not look like we don't know what we're talking about. No better way to inject a level of buyer's remorse than the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. I've seen it. I've seen small companies that master that handoff, and they seem like a big, well-oiled machine. And I've seen Fortune 100 companies that have completely failed at that handoff. And the only reason why that customer's sticking around is because their logo is big enough. But they're in the back of their mind, they're thinking, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. We're at the end of our hour. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. Thank you, Miranda and Jamie and Philip, for the time and for joining us. Really appreciate it. It was a good conversation. As usual, we were unable to get through all the questions. But great talk. I do see a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback in the questions, a lot of thank yous and great panel. So yes, thank you again for making the time. One final note that I want to leave everybody with: great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created this series, the CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. So I hope that you got something out of this discussion, and we'll see you at the next event on November 18th when we'll discuss career paths in customer success. Check out successcoaching.co to find out more and to sign up. Have a great rest of your day and week. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew, for having us.
Bye, everyone.